right, so ready to dive into a story that's, well, it's truly stranger than fiction.
Let's go.
The life of Vlad the Impaler.
Right.
I know. You're probably thinking, oh, great, another Dracula deep dive.
Mhm.
But trust me on this. This isn't about, like Hollywood vampires or anything like that. We're going way deeper into, like, the real history. This is what, the 15th century, right? The ruler who, like, inspired all those legends, Vlad the Third of Wallachia.
Yeah, Vlad the Third.
We actually have a fascinating podcast script here. It breaks down, like, his entire reign, talks about the infamous impalement fields.
Right.
It's wild, and it makes you think, like, why are we still so captivated by this guy centuries later?
Well, and that's the thing, right? You have to remember, Vlad wasn't just some, like, bloodthirsty monster. He wasn't just lurking in a Transylvanian castle. This was a real dude dealing with real problems. He was a political player in a region that was constantly under threat.
Makes sense, yeah.
And you got to remember, Wallachia, which is modern-day Romania, they were right in the path of the Ottoman Empire, which at that time, they were expanding a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So just imagine the pressure, being a leader, and, like, the survival of your entire people. It's all on your shoulders.
Yeah, talk about a high-stakes situation. So are you saying, look, we should cut Vlad some slack because of the time period, the context?
I'm not saying that.
Okay.
But it's important to remember, violence back then, it wasn't just common, it was practically, like, built into the political system. It's just how things were done.
Right. It was a different time.
Yeah,
Okay, but even if we, like, factor that in, even if we take that into consideration, the script still portrays Vlad as, like, particularly brutal.
Yeah.
Even for back then.
Yeah. I mean, this wasn't like your run-of-the-mill medieval ruler.
Right, and his, if we can even call it a signature move, was impalement.
And that's where the story takes a really, really dark turn.
Yeah.
See, with Vlad, impalement, it wasn't just about execution. Like, you kill the guy, you move on. No. This was calculated. It was theatrical, almost. A spectacle of terror. It was psychological warfare, plain and simple.
Like a message.
Exactly. Like, the script describes victims being impaled through their abdomen, their chest even, left there to die slowly, sometimes for days. And everyone could see. Anyone who even thought about crossing Vlad, this was the message.
It's tough to even fathom that level of brutality.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about some, like, hidden torture chamber. This was out in the open.
Oh, absolutely.
Public.
Public display for
Yeah.
everyone to see. And that was the point. It wasn't just about punishing your enemies. It was about sending a message to your own people, too.
Oh, I see. Keep them in line.
Exactly. Total control through fear. It's a terrifying example of how Vlad understood that real power, like true power, doesn't just come from being physically stronger.
Yeah, it's about their minds.
You got it. You control the way people think, the way they see you. That's where the real power lies.
So it's almost like he was trying to win the war before it even started.
Yeah.
Break the enemy before they even, like, thought about picking up a sword.
You got it. It's early psychological warfare at its finest, or I guess its worst. But the question is, did it actually work?
Right. Did it work?
Oh, it definitely worked, at least in terms of creating fear. The script mentions this. It's a pretty horrifying story, actually, about Vlad's forest of bodies. The Ottoman army, they were marching on this city, Targoviate.
Right.
And they just stumble upon, like, 20,000 impaled corpses. Their own comrades just there. It's just, imagine that for a second. Talk about psychological warfare.
That's a whole other level. Yeah. It's one thing to hear rumors about this guy, Vlad, but to actually see that.
It's a statement that's not just a battlefield anymore.
Oh, for sure. But, did it win him any wars?
Yeah.
Or was it all just for show?
That's where things get a little murky, even in the historical records.
Okay.
Vlad's reign, it had both victories and defeats.
Right.
He definitely held off the Ottomans multiple times, at least for a while. But how much of that was the fear versus, like, his actual military skills? Or even just alliances? That's hard to say.
So was he, like, a military genius? Or just a brutal tyrant who got lucky sometimes?
Maybe a little of both. It's tough to say for sure.
Right.
But I think that's what makes his story so fascinating even now,
Yeah.
It's like this contradiction, a ruler who really gets the power of fear and then just unleashes it.
Ruthlessly.
Yeah. But then on the other hand, at least some people say, he was really devoted to his people, to protecting his homeland.
And the script even mentions that.
Right.
That in Romania, he's kind of seen as, like, a folk hero.
Yeah. It's strange to think about, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a guy known for mass impalement.
It shows you how we can't look at these historical figures as just good or bad. It's more complicated.
Right. It's never that simple.
Vlad's legacy, it's, I don't know, like this mix of resistance and brutality and just playing the political game and then ultimately tragedy. It's a story that should remind us, like, history. It's rarely black and white.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It makes you wonder how much of his image, like the good and the bad, and how much of that is just because he lost. Like the Ottomans won, so they get to tell the story.
Oh, for sure. That happens all the time. The way history gets written, it all depends on, who's doing the writing. The losers, they often get demonized. Their side of the story gets twisted up.
To fit the narrative, yeah.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us with Vlad? Ruthless tyrant or national hero?
It's so tempting to try and put him in a box, hero or villain.
Yeah.
But honestly, he was complicated. Just a dude dealing with some really, really tough circumstances. A product of his time, for sure, but still.
Living under that constant threat of invasion, that'll change you.
Right. And yet his story still speaks to us all these centuries later.
It does. Why is that? What is it about Vlad the Impaler?
Maybe it's that, like, we want to understand why someone would do these things, Like the worst parts of human nature.
Yeah, it's almost like we're looking into a dark mirror or something.
Maybe it's a way of facing that. The fact that we're all capable of darkness and light.
Or maybe, honestly, maybe it's just a good story. I mean, come on, it's political intrigue, it's battles, it's psychological warfare.
Oh, for sure, it's a wild ride.
Straight out of a movie or a book.
And that's the thing, like any good story, it's not just entertainment. It's like we get this glimpse into what does it even mean to be human? It makes us ask the uncomfortable questions about power, about what we do when things get bad.
It's about those choices we make when everything's on the line.
Exactly. So yeah, Vlad the Impaler, centuries later, he's still got us talking.
And thinking. Which actually, speaking of, the script also mentions how Vlad, even with everything else, he's made his way into pop culture too. Movies, books, even video games. It's like he's become, I don't know, like an archetype. That kind of historical figure, their story, it just sticks with us.
And it's interesting, right, because we both kind of make him out to be a monster, and then there's this weird romanticizing of him.
Yeah, I see that.
Especially in the West, he's mostly known for being, like, the inspiration for Dracula.
Right, Bram Stoker.
Which, let's be clear, that's fiction.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But still, it goes to show you, like, how powerful Vlad's story is to take that and turn it into, like, gothic horror.
Yeah, you don't get much more gothic horror than Dracula.
And it's that blurring between what's real and what's made up.
The man versus the monster, yeah.
It's a big part of why we're still talking about Vlad. He's in this weird space between history and myth.
Which makes me wonder, though, has that fictional version Dracula, has that hurt how we see the real Vlad?
It's hard to say. I mean, Dracula, he's pure evil, right? But the real Vlad, he wasn't just that. There was more going on.
Okay.
Ambition, yeah, probably some paranoia. Religious beliefs played a part, and who knows, maybe even some twisted sense of patriotism.
Right, trying to protect his own.
He was a man of his time, which is, it's not an excuse, but it's important context. He did terrible things, but there might have been some good in there, too.
So, the million-dollar question. Why do these stories, these dark parts of history, why are we still so drawn to them? What is it about Vlad the Impaler, specifically?
It's like this need to understand, why would someone do that? We're looking at the worst of humanity.
Yeah, the extremes.
And maybe by looking at it, we face it in ourselves a little bit.
We need that reminder that we're all capable of good and bad.
Or, I don't know, maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just a good story.
I mean, there's a reason we still tell it.
Political intrigue, battles, psychological torture, it's got it all.
Like a Shakespearean tragedy, but real life.
And like those tragedies, we don't just watch for fun. They make us think about power, ambition, the choices we make when things get rough.
What would we do in that situation? It makes you think.
Exactly. So, Vlad the Impaler, dead for centuries, and we're still trying to figure him out.
And we're still talking about him. Which I think that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've gone deep into the life of Vlad the Impaler, the man who inspired the Dracula legend. And as we've seen, he was a complex figure, capable of both great cruelty and, who knows, maybe even some good.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he leaves us with more questions than answers. So, what do you think? What part of Vlad's story stuck with you?
Was it the brutality? his cunning, or maybe just the fact that even after all this time, we're still trying to figure him out. Whatever it is, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and who knows what other truths you might uncover about history and about ourselves.